The last several weeks have yielded unending case announcements from Computex, and after seeing almost all of them in person, we've rounded the most promising cases up into this video to help you stay up to speed. The showstopper this year was SilverStone's FLP02, which is a retro-themed PC case with a functioning real turbo button, molded 5¼ drive bay covers that resemble floppies, and a throwback look with modern compatibility. Corsair made bold moves, splitting the radiator chamber into its own isolated compartment. Thermalright is also threatening the case industry the same way it did to the cooler industry, bringing a $45 micro ATX case to the market. Cooler Master is back in it too, with its MF series of cases. HAVN has the BF360, which couples a heavy focus on fan design and case thermal engineering to contend with Hyte's X50, for what each company hopes will be the top performing case on thermal charts. This video will recap some of the best cases that we think are coming out over the next few months. Of course, in testing, we'll see how they actually do. We still have to review each of these individually as they launch, so we'll have a busy year with cases. As always, we'll run a best cases of 2025 piece at the end of the year as well, with all of our test data. But for now, we're looking at the best cases from Computex 2025. This will help you get caught up on the dozens of enclosures coming out to the market, and remember to check back for the full reviews as we post those as well. We'll focus on everything coming out over the next few months. As usual, we'll convert this into an article on the website later for reference, and timestamps can be found below. We brought you this video with our Patreon page at patreon.com/gamersnexus. We self-fund all of our own travel and never charge companies to visit their own booths, allowing us to maintain independence in our field reports. We film their stuff because we think it's interesting, and sometimes we walk away. And that's all because we rely on Patreon, our usual background ads, and our store. Lately on Patreon, we've started a revitalization effort, and we've posted a new Patrons Ask GN episode with Q&A and a behind-the-scenes post about what we have coming up. If you want to support our independent reporting and the way we don't sell fully paid-for coverage, especially as these trips cost us sometimes tens of thousands of dollars for 2 weeks in the field, head over to patreon.com/gamersnexus and sign up today. We have plenty more bonus posts coming. Although SilverStone rightfully got the most attention for its design, we'll start with Thermalright's case for this roundup. CPU cooler manufacturer Thermalright is best known for making so many coolers that we can't keep up with them, and particularly for making them unbelievably cheap as compared to competition. They're applying that strategy to their first case, which they announced at the show. Thermalright announced its TR M10 micro ATX case at Computex. The case will be $45 for the base model and $65 for the model with both an LCD and a digital display included. Neither will include fans. The TR M10 case has good cable management depth, simple cable management pass-throughs without BTF support, at least it knows what it's going to be, which is a cheap case, and it has heavily ventilated panels everywhere. The case fits 3 120mm side-mounted fans for intake and can technically fit fans atop the power supply shroud. This is made somewhat more viable, although distance is a challenge, by all the holes punched through the floor of the case and even the drive cages. The $65 model will include an LCD on the side, while the cheaper model will swap this out for a simple steel plate. The $65 unit also features an RGB digital display at the front, capable of spitting out basic numbers or 7-segment text. Externally, the case is simple. They've punched holes everywhere, including in the Thermalright logo shape on the side panel, and have a glass front and side. Thermalright has added shiny plastic accents to the top and front, both intended to emulate brushed aluminum, but we don't think it really comes across like that, and the ventilation everywhere is at least promising for thermal performance at the price. If Thermalright applies its CPU cooler model to cases, it'll be a major price disruption for the case industry. Up next, SilverStone's FLP02 gets our next spot in the roundup. The retro-themed case is an actual, real attempt at a modern computer case, not just some meme, while preserving aspects of cases from the late 80s and early 90s. Its clearest downside is limiting the cooling capabilities, while the clearest upside is being the reason it has limitations in cooling. It's true to the era, while modernizing compatibility. The SilverStone FLP02 is a looks-first case, just not in the usual way. The case builds upon SilverStone's FLP01 smaller form factor case, which was an April Fool's joke originally, and deploys a functional retro theming. The front panel features a 5¼ bay that resembles floppy drives and includes functional levers for removal. The bays can be used as typical, and below those molded covers there's a functional I/O panel with a power switch and reset button, both controllable by the key lock, which prevents accidental usage, more of a callback to the old days, and actually works. In theory, someone crafty could rewire it for use with something else, but it's a fan speed adjust for now. Above the stack of 5 1/4 bay covers is a covered set of modern USB and 3.5mm I/O for audio. The box doesn't have a ton of airflow. The bottom front of the case has largely blocked off intake, and support for a fan below the drive cages is really the main place you're bringing air in. And have no illusions with this. This will be a poor performer in our thermal benchmarking as compared to other cases, and that's the trade-off that they've chosen. So the objective would be to configure the build in a way where cooling can brute force past restrictive panels. The front panel supports two 120mm fans, depending on the drive layout, and the top supports three 120mm or two 140mm fans. The rear can support a 120 or a 140. The top panel is also relatively low porosity, while still allowing more air movement than the cases this is inspired by. The top can accommodate liquid cooling radiators, including a 360 shown installed, and this is the type of case where you'd probably want to use a liquid cooler to help overcome limitations of airflow. Internally, the tooling for the FLP02 is the same as Silverstone's existing set of Q1, H1, and D1 cases. Silverstone expects to sell the case for €200. US pricing was in flux due to variable tariffs, which are varying even more right now, with an expectation of $220 US pricing. The company also had more contemporary cases, like the LDO5 fish tank. The LDO5 has heavily ventilated lower panels and a ventilated side panel to get air into the system. It's a lot different from the FLP02. It's more traditional by today's standards. Silverstone plans to ship it with three 120mm ARGB fans, and it wants to hit $100, the LDO5, depending on tariffs, for a budget-focused airflow case with a glass look to it. Up next, Cooler Master's back in it this year. The company had a ton of cases, so we'll focus on the modularity offered by the MF series, and we'll recap the others at the end of this section. For the MF series, first of all, we've decided it probably means motherfucking. Cooler Master has the MF600, the MF500, and MF400 cases as pre-configured options of an otherwise totally modular approach to case design. The MF series will use 8 corners and 12 columns each, meaning that each case starts as a box of parts that can get screwed together into basically any configuration. These columns and corners will couple with rails systems internally to build the motherboard tray, allowing the cases to be reconfigured into nearly any layout. That includes inverted, mirrored, or flipped, standard ATX, and also different form factors altogether. Initially, Cooler Master plans to do the assembly of these themselves and sell them as pre-configured, fully assembled cases by using the modular parts. In the future, the company wants to offer the ability for users to customize the build on a web interface, at which point the build instructions could optionally go to Cooler Master's new Los Angeles-based assembly team to then be assembled, or in theory they could ship you a box of metal and screws and let you do it. As for what's being sold sometime this year, the MF400 through 600 will be varying sizes and layouts and available soon. The MF600 is the largest of these, with three 140mm fans and one 120mm fan included. The price target is $200, tariffs notwithstanding. The MF600 has an all-aluminum look to it, though it uses a mix of materials for the chassis, steel and aluminum mostly. Externally, Cooler Master has done well to blend the columns, corners, and panels to create something that has a less gamer-y aesthetic to it. The front-to-back flow design is a classic that should work well for cooling. Internally, the motherboard tray is basically a giant hole with some rails and slats across for support. This means a weaker tray structurally, but one which is more versatile, as shown in the reconfiguration with different orientations. The pre-configured MF500 should be $165, and it'll have two 200mm fans and one 120mm fan, a much finer mesh front, and I/O on the bottom of the front panel. Going with the two 200s is a classic Cooler Master move that we're looking forward to testing. The old half series did this. The MF400 is micro ATX, so it's smaller, with a lower price target at $150, the same two 200s and one 120 configuration. It still uses 8 corners and 12 columns. Cooler Master also debuted its new Cosmos cases, including a special edition variation with the NVIDIA DGX style front panel, which Cooler Master actually manufactured, and another Cosmos with ductwork for air cooling. We currently are critical of the special edition's liquid cooling configuration and question how well it'll work, though the size of the radiator should be able to brute force performance since it's using 4 180mm fans. It's just that they're blowing straight into a motherboard and wall, so the company needs to do something to get that air up and out of there. The company also showcased its so-called Elite series of cheap cases. in a questionable move for naming. It features a tragedy of naming that doesn't have much rhyme or reason for the model numbers, and we talk about those in the separate Cooler Master video, but at least they're cheap. It also had a new Q500 core following the Q500 series styling. The Q500 core is supposed to be $60 to $70 and is made entirely of steel. It'll include 3D print source files for modifications and can fit up to a 360mm radiator. But the MF series are the most interesting to us today. Hyte is up next and had something really unique for this show. Hyte showcased its new X50 case, which is its most mechanically complicated product to manufacture to date. The X50 uses a bubbly external look that's deceptively difficult to make, while attempting to be the highest performing case on benchmark charts. Hyte uses a front panel that's perforated all the way around the apex of the turret on the front, leaving only a small strip at the mounting points for rigidity. The case has louvered slats at the back as well, including for PCIe slots, which add mechanical and manufacturing complexity, but strengthen the chassis structure, something we experienced firsthand when flexing it, while improving airflow performance. Hyte noted that its intent, which we'll test in our review, is to help project air away from the system, highlighting that there's always focus on reducing intake impedance, but noting that exhaust impedance is similarly important and often overlooked. The louvered approach means that PCIe slot covers keep all their original steel, rather than being punched and removed like a typical slot cover, but the gaps are created by punching the steel through, outward, and then twisting at the joint on both sides. This keeps rigidity while theoretically reducing exhaust impedance. The case is almost entirely steel as well. Internally, the power supply shroud is steel, the motherboard tray, as usual, is steel, the walls are mostly steel, and the floor and some connecting pieces are plastic. But its presence is overall mitigated as much as Hyte was able to achieve. Hyte has a few styles of feet for the X50, including what the company refers to as paws, shown as the rounded feet on some of the color models, with bars for models like the white case. The case can have either a laminated so-called acoustic glass side panel or a full-on mesh panel that's focused on performance cooling. The top-mounted power supply shroud will help by enabling more bottom intake by getting the power supply out of the way of the bottom, in addition to using the power supply as another internal fan to help guide the air up and through the system. With a fully mesh panel, this should also help bring air into the computer from outside. We'll see how the case does in our review, but from a manufacturing and engineering standpoint, it already gets credit for overcoming challenges with going as mesh heavy as the case is. You can learn a lot about this in our interview with product director Rob Teller in the X50 coverage from Computex. We spent a lot of time with him talking about Hyte's tens of thousands of dollars of failed samples, where the company walked us through all the trial and error front panel failures before it finally figured out how to manufacture the panel the company actually wanted. The case should be priced for $120 with mesh and $150 with glass pre-tariff. Lian Li is next. Lian Li had a relatively large breakthrough this year with its ongoing attempts to figure out how to embed fans in glass front panels. This has historically been challenging since it results in lower yields and broken glass, which is expensive, and in the worst case, just less surface area available for intake since larger borders have to be maintained for structural reasons. The Lian Li Lancool 217 Infinity and the Lancool 4 cases both make use of this new approach to fans in glass, effectively mixing mesh grates in front of the fans with the tempered glass look. The Lancool 217 Infinity is a Lancool 217, obviously, which we have a review nearly completed for, and that includes all the tooling for the case internals that we already know. The only exception where tooling was changed is the front panel, enabling the infinity mirror effect with LEDs and the support for mounting the glass panel. The only other change is to I/O, where Lian Li made it optionally mountable to the top or bottom side. The case will ship with two 170mm front fans in the glass and one rear-mounted fan. It should ship at $120, they say. The Lancool 4 is more complicated and is entirely new tooling. The case still uses the four-door approach that the Lancool series has become known for, so the left side features a large sheet of glass resting on top of a mesh plate that opens separately. The mesh plate allows intake through fans mounted in the bottom of the case, or just the GPU, with lower side panel mounting available for 120mm fans. The panels open with a button release mechanism to allow them to lock separately, and the right side also features a glass and steel composition with a clear line of sight through the other side of the front of the case. A cable-covered door can be screwed down to hide the cable management behind the motherboard tray as well. A pogo pin setup allows the front panel to transfer power without use of a cable, followed by a mix of painted glass and plastic covers to hide cables daisy chaining the fans together. Lian Li is considering including 3 140mm by 30mm thick front fans and 3 120 by 25mm side fans, which are more standard, with a pricing target at $130, including all 6 of these fans. This would be extremely competitive if they can do it, and Lian Li has committed on camera with us to a 5-year warranty for the fans. Lian Li had a few honorable mentions at the show as well. Its 011 Mini V2 made an appearance and manages to cram an ATX power supply into the case by punching out space in the side panel. The Mini V2 should be $90 without fans and $100 with 5 120mm fans. The Dan Case B4 was also an interesting showing, mostly for its ability to attach feet and switch to a much higher volume vertical orientation. It makes use of the space provided by the feet by also including a radiator extension chamber to add support for a 360mm radiator on the side by extending it down into the feet. The Vector 100 Mini Micro ATX case is intended to sell for $45 without fans, making it a direct competitor to Thermalright's new MATX case as well. Antec and Noctua are up next in a collaboration. This one's pretty short though. The companies are working together to manufacture an alternative to the Antec Flux Pro, except with Noctua fans. The Flux Pro was already a chart topper in our case benchmarks, and our reviews showed that it's been a high performer. So Antec isn't changing much beyond the colors and what fans are included here. The companies will do a like-for-like swap of 6 Noctua fans in place of the original 6 Antec fans, switching to 4 140mm NFA14 G2 fans, which are found on the D15 G2, and 2 120mm NFA12 G2 fans, which are new for the shroud top. The case price is still being finalized, but it will be expensive. We'd expect to see this fall within the range of the $300s to $400s somewhere, US dollars, as the case itself is typically around $180 before the Noctua fans. Most of the time was spent on coloring brown panels and grommets to match the fans as closely as possible. And Antec also had some other stuff they were showing, so they're working on a new 900 case based upon the Antec 900 from decades ago now. And they had 2 variants they showed, one of which included 2 200mm Noctua fans at the front. So they might be experimenting with more Noctua collaborations, even for the upcoming 900. We don't have a ton of detail on the 900 yet. We had the whole case to look at, and we show that in the video. But as far as pricing, release date, all of that is still being finalized. We toured the HAVN testing lab in Taiwan to look at the company's new BF360 case, following up the HS420 that we previously reviewed overall positively. In addition to a 40-plus page presentation from its thermal engineer detailing all the various testing performed to prepare the new case and fans for launch, we also got a look at the new BF360 and its fans. We appreciated the time the company spent to demonstrate all the testing and the engineering, because most companies don't make thermal engineers readily available. HAVN's new BF360 aims to be highly competitive for case thermals and has dedicated a significant amount of that toward fine-tuning the fans. We'll see how it does in testing later in the year, of course. The case will use 2 180mm fans at 40mm thickness in the front, helping with higher static pressure performance. In testing, HAVN experimented with positioning these front fans higher versus lower on the front panel, ultimately settling to mostly bias them slightly up in the case. This should help push more air straight into the GPU, which helps get further tuning from a ramp shaped at the front of the power supply shroud. HAVN tested numerous shroud ramp types and shapes, finding ultimately that a wide and relatively modestly angled ramp provided the best performance with the fewest acoustic trade-offs. The panels are heavy-duty and designed with similar attention to detail as the HS420. The case has tuned placement of structural struts in the panels to reduce impedance to flow and normally try to position them behind fan hubs, with wide enough top mounting to support even more 180mm fans without additional fan mount rail obstructions if going the larger route. HAVN has brought over smaller attention to detail embellishments on this case from the HS420, including molded text in the plastic cable routing channels in the back to guide novice users to potentially optimal routing pathways. For looks, HAVN is going for white and black, but with a faked stone-looking front panel. Pulling that front panel reveals the steel plate above the top 180mm fan, serving to prevent circulation and force air intake through the ideal channels. For the fans, HAVN experimented with fans up to 52mm thick, but ultimately settled on 40mm thick options for a balance of thickness and performance. All of HAVN's new fans use larger bearings, which it says helps stabilize the blade during rotation. HAVN also has notched the leading edge of the blades to help capture and force air through the blades, although we need to see A/B testing to know how much that really matters. They also did some tuning to the texture on the fan hub, which they say helps with the air going along the inner walls of the fan. Corsair's Computex showing this year was much stronger than some of its prior years. The company seems to be pushing hard after its relatively good reception for the Frame 4000D cases, and it's expanding the scope of the Frame series, but also it's making some radical cooling changes to its new cases. Corsair showed its new Frame 5000D with LCD panel, its Air 5400, that's the one we'll focus on, with effectively 3 chambers that completely isolate the front radiator air from the rest of the system, and it had a prototype Frame 4000D with a power board from Singularity PCs. The Frame 5000D is a larger 4000D, and we'll likely test it soon enough, so we'll just skip that one today and we'll focus on the more unique of these. The Corsair Air 5400 uses a separate chamber for a front-mounted radiator, which involves running the tubes across effectively a shop-brushed set of bristles for tube routing. This means that the radiator, likely used for a CPU cooler here, would pull air in externally from the front and then propel it immediately out of the case, following an interior curved wall in that separate chamber. The air never gets into the main chamber as a result of this, which means it doesn't increase the sort of local ambient temperature. Likewise, as a downside potentially, this means less airflow over often ignored components like VRM or system memory. The bottom of the case uses a duct to guide air straight in from the bottom intake, and then it points it straight at the GPU. Corsair claims that its A/B testing of this ductwork creates about a 1 to 2 degree improvement in GPU thermals versus testing without it. Likewise, there's another top-mounted duct that could encase top fans to provide some cooling to the rest of the motherboard by pulling the air across it, although flow-through cooling from the GPU would also push air into the memory area. It'll be warmed, but that's better than nothing. The rear can technically fit a 120mm fan with an adapter, but there's no real reason to mount one. It'll blow nearly half the air straight into the curved glass wall, potentially causing noise issues and definitely limiting thermal benefits of a fan there. Overall, the case is a riskier attempt by Corsair standards at a new design that we don't see too often from the company. We're looking forward to doing thermal testing on it as well. The Frame 4000D prototype is also worth showing here again. The power board's pretty cool. It's at the back, doesn't provide any logging functionality like you might find on an Elmore Labs bench table, but it does offer cable routing by funneling all the connectors through a rear-mounted PCB. Like everyone else, they had other cases present, such as an open frame case, but we'll point you towards our Computex news coverage for all that. Thermaltake also had a lot at the show. For cases, its IX700 enclosure was being used in an immersion cooling system, which was mostly just cool to see. The more consumer-focused cases for our audience would include the View 390 Air, the TR200, and the TR300. The TR200 and TR300 introduced larger versions of the mini ITX TR100, just with micro ATX support in one and ATX in the other. Micro ATX seems to be taking off more this year in the case market. The View 390 Air uses a curved tempered glass panel around the top and the side, with options for up to 200mm fans at the front. Thermaltake hasn't yet finalized the stock fan configuration, but it has finalized the price target. It's trying to hit $150 pre-tariff, and the company thinks it can include 2 fans at that price. They mentioned to us options of either 2 200s at the front or 2 120s at the back or side as the included fans. We'd favor the 2 200s mostly because users with liquid coolers will already be getting 120s or 140s, and 120s are also more common just in bins of parts for seasoned PC builders. The case can fit fans along the right side panels as well, with 2 120 rear exhaust fans available optionally at the back. 2 can fit here because the optional screen location found above the motherboard tray, which is just a steel panel without the screen, makes the case taller and provides clearance for that second fan. The front panel design uses a brick pattern with a high porosity, which might actually make this fairly competitive thermally, depending on the fan configuration. This has been a lot of cases, so we'll keep these last few short. Phanteks was also present at the show. Phanteks had the budget-focused G370A ATX case and its XT-M3 micro ATX case. The G370A makes compromises to hit a price target of $60 while including 3 120mm RGB M25 fans. Phanteks described it as a smaller version of the G400 case. The case can fit SSI EEB boards technically, but they'd block all the cable management routing aside from the highest pass-throughs in the case. It's otherwise about as standard and plain as a case can be. The price is obviously the goal for this one. You can learn more about the XT-M3 micro ATX case in our Phanteks Computex coverage. Tryx was also present. The new Flova case is currently a concept, but Tryx is experimenting with trying to get a cross-flow fan integrated with axial fans in the case. The idea would be to shove a cross-flow or transverse fan in the same space that would traditionally be used for larger front fans instead. This would provide more even laminar flow across the top edge of the GPU and nearest to the glass. Whether or not it actually helps is a more complicated testing question. Crossflow fans aren't necessarily the best for this type of cooling. They have their use cases, they're pretty limited, but they could definitely be tuned to be competitive with enough research and care. We saw it work with the meshless AIO mini ITX case previously. For now, this is an experiment that we're excited about because we want to test something different. We have an animation showing how these work in our meshless AIO case review, and if you want to learn more about the science of it, you can check that out. As for Montech, the company had a ton of cases present, and will be launching them over the next year or so. Some of them will be out in Q2 2026, some are out later this year. For today, we'll just keep it short and focus on the cheapest cases from Montech that are coming out the soonest, as the others are still being finalized. The X5 and X5M are Montech's newest budget-focused cases. The case is supposed to be $60 for the X5M, and that's the micro ATX variant, and then it'll be $70 to $75 for the X5 ATX case. These cases use a wavy, ventilated mesh front panel. The X5 intends to include 3 140 fans in the front and 1 120 rear stock fan, with an optional 2 120 fans for the top of the shroud, though these would have limited benefit due to the panel styling. The $60 X5M will include 4 120 fans. In Win's cases were mostly too early in development to get into a lot of detail on. The company didn't have prices or fan configurations ready, so we'll skip all of those until they're closer to ready. The one we can close this video on, though, is In Win's Chronomancy, which was its 40-year anniversary case design. It's not really meant to be sold. They expect to make around 40 units, fittingly, but it's just kind of cool. The case uses an IR wand with gestures to open the exterior aluminum shell, close it, open the other chamber, or adjust the volume level of various music tracks baked into the case with its included speaker. Manufacturing the case is a nightmare, using a large and thick sheet of acrylic that gets laser engraved and then slowly bent. The aluminum panels also require bending, with the front using a stainless steel and the base using large aluminum pillars. Inside, the Chronomancy does actually hold a computer, but it's obviously secondary to the design, which is just a cool showcase of workmanship. That's it for this one. So again, we have to test all this stuff as it's coming out. We're going to skip a lot of these. It really just depends on which cases are interesting to you all and what comes out hitting the prices they think they can hit with the specs they told us they're going to hit. So Thermalright is definitely high on our list. SilverStone's FLP02 we're really excited about. Corsair's case, the Air 5400, is very interesting. We have a lot of work for ourselves later in the year with these cases, and check back for all that. And as always, subscribe for more. You can go to store.gamersnexus.net to help us directly, or patreon.com/gamersnexus, and we'll see you all next time.